like an individual issue. Now it just feels like it's everywhere. But what if burnout isn't about weakness, but more about decision overload and nervous system strain? Today on ZZ Exchange, we're unpacking what actually helps prevent burnout for both individuals and leaders. So, welcome to ZZ Exchange. Here we have short form conversations where I sit with experienced leaders and just think out loud about how leadership actually works, including the parts that we're all still figuring out. So, hi, I'm Ainsley Erickson. I'm an executive coach, marketing strategist, and the founder of Zen Zero. And in my work, I sit with leaders who are navigating pressure, identity, and the quiet cost of staying on top of their game. And burnout is unfortunately something I come back to again and again because it just tends to show up, like not in this huge collapse that I think some people kind of think, but often is just this slow erosion that high performers in particular, they really try to normalize until they can't anymore. So today I'm joined by the fabulous John Whittle, a former lawyer turned executive coach who's spent years working specifically with high pressure professionals. John works inside law firms to build systems that actually protect people and not just their individual habits, but actually bringing about structural change. But while John comes from the legal world, I think what he sees shows up everywhere. And that's the conversation that I'm really excited about having today because I don't think burnout is a niche issue. I truly believe it's a leadership crisis and one that needs to be talked about more. So, John, welcome to ZZ Exchange.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you have worked in one of the most pressure-saturated environments there is, the legal world. And so when you look at kind of what's happening more broadly, why do you think burnout feels so universal right now? Like, yes, lawyers, but beyond that as well.
Well, I mean, I think it goes to how we measure productivity, and we measure productivity by how hard people work and how many
Mm,
hours they're churning out, and whether they're at their desk from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. And so,
yeah.
going from an industrialized society where you were looking at inputs and outputs and translating that to kind of the knowledge work of lawyers or accountants or office work, I think that we just got lost in how we measure productivity. And by
Mm-hmm.
focusing on hours put in only, I think it leads to people getting burned out.
Because that's especially true with lawyers, right? Because it does literally come into billable hours
No,
and
that's right.
happening.
That's right. And that's why it's a unique challenge to overcome in the legal setting, is because that's how productivity is measured at most legal practices, is how many billable hours are you putting in a year?
And I think there is that too, like even as an owner of a marketing agency, right? There's sort of the billable hours and how that happens. But when I also think about burnout and I think about my own experience with it, I think, yes, it's about the volume of work, but I think it's also the cognitive weight of just constantly like choosing, prioritizing, responding. Like, I also think it comes into that decision fatigue piece too, where we respond to like every decision like it's high stakes because we don't have systems or the thinking in place for how to also look at those decisions differently. And I think that also really helps play into it.
That's right. And those things that you identified, whether it's categorizing urgency or sequencing tasks that need to be done, all of those things are very systematic things that can be fixed. But often when we talk about burnout, we put it on the worker or the individual and blame them. They're not strong enough. They're not resilient enough. They don't work hard enough, when it's a systems problem instead of a personal problem.
Yeah, well, it's like the saying, what is it, like be yourself until yourself is tired. But like if you have systems in place, they actually can do that heavy lifting for you so you can continue to kind of show up. But I think as well, like when I think about it, you know, and I want to hear from your perspective, like what are we asking kind of modern leaders or professionals to carry now that maybe didn't exist 10, 20 years ago? And why do you think burnout's become even more so universal and more so prevalent?
Yeah, again, I still think it's that culture of hard work, and that's the expectation. We want to measure people for how hard they work instead of how what their output is. Are they doing good work? Is the quality of what they're doing good? Instead of just, are you at your desk for a certain amount of hours in a day?
Yeah, because that's not fun for anyone, and that's where engagement disappears, all of it as well. And I do want to ask you about as well, because I think there's burnout that's in relation to systems, which I think is so important. But I also think there's something that happens in our physical bodies as well that we often skip over. Like what actually goes on kind of neurologically when someone's nervous system gets overloaded and they no longer kind of get that signal that it's safe to stop, right? Like it's that fight, flight, freeze kind of situation. But yeah, what else do you kind of see?
Well, in work with legal firms, the interesting part is when you look at the pressure that creates that burnout, I categorized it into two different parts. There's the inherent pressure of practicing law that comes from client pressures, that comes from deadlines in court cases, just the inherent things about practicing law that create pressure. Systems aren't necessarily going to remove those. That's just it's pressure created by the job. And that kind of pressure can be relieved through mindfulness exercises, to firms that offer yoga classes or making sure you're taking the right amount of time off. But that's where most firms stop.
Yeah.
They don't go on to the pressures created by how work is assigned, how work flows from a partner to an associate, how it flows back to the partner from the associate, and making sure that there's systems in place that can distribute that pressure the way it should be distributed.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something you said before as well, like I think it's separating the stressor and the stress, right? Because the deadline might pass or the big case in a legal I don't have my legal terminology down pat, but what ends in the legal side of things or in whatever industry you're in. But I think there's still the actual feeling of stress, and that's something that you still have to deal with and actually like release from the body. Like before I got on this conversation with you, I was thinking about it, and even on my walk this morning, like I saw Luna, my dog, got into a completely stressful situation. She's reactive with other dogs, and then afterwards she literally just shook it off, like shook the stress out of her body. And so I think, like you're saying, there's the actual stressor, which I think can help with systems and everything to like move through it. But then you also do have to have the mindfulness, go for a walk, have community, movement for your body, like, and actually find ways to exit the feeling of stress out of the body. And I think sometimes those two things get mixed up, and you need to separate them and kind of realize that they're different things as well.
That's right.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I see you in your work, John. Like you always talk about protective systems and what you bring into law firms. So can you maybe talk about a concrete example of what that looks like what you would build or create inside a firm?
Sure. A big underlying theme when I talk to leaders in law firms about these systems is it's really communication is a foundation of it. Because I'll give an example. I was talking to an associate who was feeling a lot of stress, and she had received an email from a partner at 10:47 p.m. about a matter they were working on. And there had been no communication about how what was she supposed to do? Immediately respond? Wait till the next day to respond? Was he just saying, hey, I've been thinking about this and didn't want to forget about it? There was no communication about any of that. So she starts over processing, going, do I need to respond now? Do I need to, And so if the leader had said in the email, you don't have to respond to this immediately, I'm just dropping this so I don't forget, or this is really important, there's a fire going on with a client, I need a response, or if ahead of time there was some understanding of how to prioritize that task. Mm-hmm. And it would have been a pressure release valve to just completely eliminate the stress
Yeah.
that it was causing.
So sometimes those structures that you talk about too are like rules of engagement, right? Like how we're going to operate as a team, as a firm, like, yeah, what that actually looks like.
And another big one is capacity.
Okay.
Leaders don't communicate with their team about what their individual team members' capacity is. And they're not open about it in both directions. And the team members don't feel comfortable communicating when they're reaching capacity.
Yeah.
And the leaders don't ask and inquire, how are we doing with capacity? So that's another thing I always encourage law firm leaders to do is if they have weekly meetings with their team, have a check-in. Green, yellow, red. How are you doing capacity wise? Or is everything okay? Are you green? Are you starting to feel a little bit? Is it yellow? Or red, I'm over the limit. I'm maxed out. And if it's red, then there needs to be an intervention and a discussion.
But how do you create the psychological safety, especially like in a law firm where what you were saying it's all about output for someone to be vulnerable enough to say, "Hey, I'm at a yellow," or "Holy heck, I'm at a red." Like how do you kind of start to build that capacity within a team?
The leader has to be willing to be open to it. I've talked to many older partners who have the mentality, I put in my 2,400 annual billable hours, and by God, these associates are going to do that too. And that's the mentality. There's no openness to considering improving the system. And
Right.
as you know, in coaching, if somebody's not open to change, I mean, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And so it really takes the leader being open to addressing the problem and not just putting it on the people that work for them to fix it themselves.
And I think that's very true, especially as someone steps into a role or takes over the leadership of a team, right? Oftentimes they're inheriting patterns of behavior or models
Absolutely.
of how things have been done. So it's also finding or taking the time to actually step back and look at what is happening and create the space so you can break that model, right? So then you don't just keep on the path of continuing to create burnout in the organization and in the individuals that are kind of working for you. And I think it is that pattern recognition, which is also so key to then being able to look at what systems, what steps you can put in place to try and present it.
Right. And another thing I found that this is interesting from a leadership standpoint, many times somebody will call and say, our firm systems are not well, my associates are all stressed out, that, they're not.
Yep.
And so when I get into it and start having conversations with the leader, I discover that the leader actually themselves needs help,
Yep.
balancing these
100%.
pressure and finding the release valves. And once you fix that, sometimes that trickles down to the entire team. And you don't even have to start talking about firm-wide systems. You just work with the leader to develop their systems for dealing with their own pressure and burnout prevention.
Because oftentimes, right, it's not the work that causes the burnout. It's not even the hours that that cause the burnout. It's if someone's engaged, they feel safe, they're making decisions, they're all of doing that. That can all build up, but it is about having systems, safety, and kind of like the permission also to pause. I think is really big, and being able to look at it.
Right. Because again, the pressure is not bad just
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself. It's
Stress
pressure
isn't
that's not
bad in and
right.
of itself, right? Like,
Right. Pressure that's unanalyzed is bad and not trying to figure out where it's coming from and how to release it. But just in and of itself, it's not bad.
yeah, no, for sure. Well, John, I want to be cognizant of time, and I know we've got Coach's Corner, and I have some rapid fire questions for you as we come up on kind of the 15-minute mark.
Sure.
So, three questions I'm going to hit you with. What's the earliest sign of burnout that high performers tend to normalize?
It's those 10:47 p.m. emails. It's the Saturday phone calls. It's those out of sequence times when you're feeling the pressure to take care of an urgent task that might not be that urgent.
Right. And just feeling like you have to consistently respond. Okay. And where do professional cultures unintentionally reward exhaustion?
I think with high performers, especially, they high performers work, and put more work upon themselves, and leadership often pats that on the back and quietly says, "Keep doing that."
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, it's even without malice, right? It's like, oh man, you can do so much. Oh, great job. Wow, I can't believe you can take that on. And from an ego perspective, that validates us, right? And you're inadvertently like creating this cycle. Okay, so for people listening, what's one expectation people could question this week to protect their capacity better?
At the end of the week, look back and say, what did I place urgency on that really wasn't urgent?
Mm-hmm.
And look at tasks as they come in on whether it's something that I can change if I make the wrong decision, or whether it's really important to get it right the first time. And for those that it's not really, you can change, don't spend a lot of time trying to decide what to do.
Yeah, it comes down to that risk continuum, right? Like
Right.
move quickly if you can undo it, or spend the time if you can't. No, that's awesome. John, this has been exactly the kind of conversation I wanted to have with you, just super practical and honest. And I think a little bit uncomfortable in the best way, too, for people listening, right? Like it's hard to also take acknowledgement of how you might be contributing to your own burnout as well, and what are the steps that you can take. But for people who are listening, if you are feeling depleted right now, I think it's removing that pressure that this is in any way a personal failure. Oftentimes it's just a signal that the systems around you, or even like within you, maybe need a little bit more protection and a little bit more thought. And I think that's information really worth acting on. And for us, as always, we'll link John's work below if you want to explore what he's building inside legal firms. And if this conversation surfaced something for you, I'd love to know. So you can drop a comment, share it with someone who needs it, or come find me at Zen Zero. And as always, you can subscribe to ZZ Exchange for these short form conversations that hopefully offer lots of perspective, language, and permission, not just basically pressure or packaged answers. So, John, thanks for joining. And any final parting words from you?
No, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks.